Hey Brewland, welcome back to M.O.A. Brew Academy. Today we're going to be going over some basic things whenever cleaning out your tap lines as well as the tap itself, the tap heads, and then just getting your keg sanitized for that new beer that's going to be going in. So starting out, we're just going to be breaking down the tap head so we can get those pieces cleaned up over the course of time. I'll show you, you can actually wind up with buildup here in your tap head, so you can see the gunk that's all in there, and it wants to freeze up the head so that they're actually hard to pull, and it just happens slightly over time, and it can be just one of those aggravating things to have to clean up. So we're just going to go through the breakdown process. One of the handy dandy tools that will come with your tap head most of the time is this awesome little wrench here. That's what you use to break down these rings right here. You'll see the little placement hole for the notch that's on the wrench just fits in there, and then you can just start loosening those guys up. So I'll get this broken down. We'll do it in quick speed so that we can move on to the next processes and go from there. But for the sanitizing, again, we're using 2.5 gallons with 1 ounce of StarSan per their dilution guidelines. So we'll be using that to run through the tap lines. We've got it heated up to 150 degrees so that it should, over the course of running that hot water with the sanitizer through there, it'll pull out any of the gunk in those lines, and then we'll just leave that sitting in the lines for a little while, to at least a minute or between a minute and 5 minutes, to actually just let it sanitize. And then we'll take an empty keg with just CO2, and then we'll blow those lines clean and leave them be until the next beer's in the keg, put in, carbonated, and ready to drink. All right, so now that we've got the tap heads broke down, I've got some of our StarSan solution. I'm just gonna throw all these parts in here, and for the duration of our keg clean as well as filling the keg up, I'm just gonna let this stuff soak, break down that gunk that's on there from the leftover beer, and we'll just get them cleaned up with our handy dandy toothbrush, and then get it all put back together and get it ready to drink some beer later on. And a quick note, one of the things that we're gonna do as well is you'll have liquid build up in here from the leftover beer. We're just gonna go ahead and clean some of that up with napkins, as well as give it a good cleaning with that toothbrush with some of the StarSan solution. Even though later on, whenever we actually purge the lines, we'll get some StarSan to go through there. It just helps get some of the stuff that may get stuck in the cracks once we put all of this stuff back together again. So now we're going to be moving on to the actual cleaning of the keg and sanitizing it. So from the last beer that was in there, as you can see, we've got all the gunk cleaned out. We took our long brush that we have, got all of the excess settlement that just, happened to come in from the fermenter, all of that stuff cleaned out of there. But here's our StarSan solution, nice, bubbly, and ready to clean. And it kind of serves twofold because we have our siphon here. We're going to be using it, obviously, to move the StarSan solution over to the keg, but also we'll have some of this solution left over to actually sanitize this again, because obviously we're going to be using it to take the beer from the secondary fermenter to place in our keg. And the cap for the keg, we just threw it in here with all of our parts off of the tap as they're sitting there waiting to be put back together. Again, letting them soak, just get sanitized and get them nice and cleaned up. But we'll start moving the StarSan over, and I will show you the process essentially to purge your lines, as well as get everything put back together to have a clean, nice, sanitized setup so that you don't wind up ruining beer in the keg. So we're just gonna let this run off. We'll probably use roughly about 2 of our 2.5 gallons of water. That'll give us ample solution to be able to run through our keg lines, make sure everything's good to go, as well as just to give a good shake around in the keg itself before we connect it back up. And then in our actual pot, just about a 1/2 gallon left to sanitize this once more, once we're done with it, and any of the other items that we may have as we get ready to brew our next batch of beer. So we've got our majority of solution moved over to the keg. We're about to seal it up, give it a good shake, let it sit, start sanitizing. But one of the other things is these connection bins. So as we were showing in earlier videos, get some of this stuff unwrapped in here, is to remember your white connectors are always for the in. This is what for your gas flow into the keg, and your black ball lock connector is going to be the out coming from the keg to the tap head. One of the things obviously in these cracks around in here as you connect them back and forth, not so much on the gas line, but especially on the beer line, obviously settlement, beer splash from that connecting, disconnecting gets in there. So we're just gonna let these actually soak a little while we let the keg do its thing as well, and then get them brushed out with our handy dandy cleaning toothbrush and get everything ready to go to purge these lines. So whenever I'm cleaning these kegs out, one of the things, I get everything sealed up on top, as you can see there. I get the post wiped off with solution as well, because they do get beer on them whenever you're disconnecting, connecting the lines in there. But just give it a good vigorous shake. It's gonna bubble up in there, so you will get that foam from the StarSan, but it's completely okay. It's just one of those things that'll sit in there and it'll help sanitize. So I'll just give it a shake. I'll let it sit a few minutes, give it another shake. I'll rinse, repeat this process typically 4 or 5 times, and then pop it open, take a look, see how it looks inside, get it closed back up. We'll get those connectors cleaned up like I said, and then connect everything and then purge our lines. now we're ready to start connecting everything, turning the gas on and purging these lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and start out with my furthest one. You can see the most outside gauge. Go ahead and turn the keg. So I've got my inline on this side of the keg that we're connecting now. That's where our gas again is gonna go in. Before we put pressure on it, it just makes it a little bit easier to deal with, which I need to mark my lines thinking out of it, of which side is which for right and left, but we'll get to that later. And then put our beer line on, make sure that it's good and connected. One of the things that I did notice while I was cleaning them is that the little tightening piece here on the gas line, it loosened up, so I just used an adjustable wrench to tighten that up. So you want to make sure that all your connections are tight, that way you don't turn your gas on and just have a silent leak and then wind up dumping most of your gas tank overnight or over the course of a few days and finding it empty or almost empty. But now we're just gonna turn our tank on, and then we'll go ahead and adjust it back for the PSI, turn our gas line on, and then we'll just gas it up to about 10 PSI. You can hear the gas filling the keg up as we speak. You can actually see it putting pressure on the line here. It's a little hard to see, but the little bit of beer that's left in the line, it's pushing it up towards the tap head. So now we're just gonna start purging our line. So the line that we did hooked up, just by process of elimination, figured out that it's the right handle. So just gonna let that run for a bit, push that hot water with the sanitizer solution in there, and just let it purge out through there. And then once we get filled up in our little tray here, we'll dump that, and then we'll switch everything over and do it with the next tap. So we just opened up our keg, and as you can see, there is foam. Oh yeah, it just opened up there. So we got the solution dumped back out. We're gonna heat that back up to sanitize a few more kegs that we have here to the side. That way we don't have to waste water in solution. But we'll get our siphon, just make sure that it is good to go. We'll let this settle out, make sure that as much of the foam is out of there as well as any remaining liquid. Let it air dry, and we will be back for part 3 of the coffee oatmeal porter and get that all put together. But if you haven't already, please subscribe down below, and we'll be back for the coffee oatmeal porter.